Hello, in this video I'm going to show you two games in the Umikaze, the tier 2 Japanese destroyer, and well, they're both on this map, the Islands map, which is kind of one of the two maps available to low tier ships. Two? Yeah, only two, and well, I actually really don't like playing this one in my destroyers, and my Japanese destroyers in particular, because you've got all these islands across the centre of the map, which means that it's very hard to get kind of long distance straight firing arcs to use in the Umikaze in particular, that allow me to kind of snipe away at enemy ships, at least in the early stages of the map when you're kind of fighting over the capture points. But anyway, spotted the enemy, so I fired off my first salvo of torpedoes, and I'm actually in way too close to the enemy ships here, but I'm trying to capture C, and well, I used my speed boost to get in here quickly to try and beat the enemy team, but it wasn't that effective. But I'm hoping to capture C before I have to escape, but the enemy is actually in here with me, so I'm not capturing anything. Fire a couple more torpedoes off at that cruiser and then decide that I'm probably better to get out of here. Actually managed to get a hit on that cruiser, which I wasn't expecting, but I got lucky. Actually I got two hits. Took away about half of its health, and as I said, just popped my smoke, and I'm using the speed boost still, and just trying to get it out of here. I never quite got a shot on that cruiser, but I take one, which is a bit speculative, but whatever, you take them occasionally, especially when you've only got a 20-second reload. But while I was looking for that shot, I actually forgot I was still turning, so I've ended up turning back into the cap circle, and now I'm trying to turn back out, see a destroyer, fire a broadside at it with my guns, but I don't actually have enough space here to finish my turn, so I'm going to run aground, which is really not something you want to do in your destroyers, and well, you'll see why in a moment. So I thought for a second maybe I'd be able to squeeze out forwards, but it's clearly not going to happen, so I jam the ship into reverse, and I just want to get moving again quickly, take a shot back at that destroyer, and get a hit, do 1,000 damage, and I just lost a third of my hit points to, I think was a battleship shell hitting me. But I think I've got enough, space that I can go forward again. I'm not sure what those were, quite large shells, so they might be from the battleship again. And that was another big explosion, but I've managed to get away from that with my life. Take another hit, but luckily it does moderate damage. And now, basically the enemy, well, they haven't taken C, but they're kind of moving around the flank and they heavily outnumber us. It's just myself and this battleship here. And I can't kind of fire towards the enemy battleships because my battleship's in the way, but I can take a couple of shots at this cruiser here, just to try and help my battleship out. But other than that, I'm heading towards the open ocean because that's where I like to be in my Japanese destroyers. Ooh. Taking shots at me, but it sounded like that one actually bounced. So that battleship must be firing armor piercing at me, and I actually got two hits on that cruiser there as well. Again, not quite enough to sink it, but I'm just happy to do the damage at this point in the game. So I switched to guns because it's on low health. I figure I might be able to finish it off. Get set on fire by something. Managed to get one hit on the cruiser.
Problem solved, sir.
Torpedoes back up, so I fire them at that battleship, which is in range. And now I'm just trying to get this island between me and the enemy ships because, well, I don't like getting shot at this much. Even though I'm kind of manoeuvring a bit, and it's at fairly long range for them, so they're not hitting me all that often. But still, only got 4,500 hit points, and that's kind of one lucky battleship shell will do me in. But my team's arriving to help me there. There's a friendly St. Louis, and behind it is another cruiser and a battleship. So it's not looking bad for our team here. So I decide, since I've got a bit of separation from the enemy, and that cruiser that was spotting me is now behind an island, I can come back out here and look for some more shots on these battleships. But the battleship that I fired that last broadside of torpedoes at seems to have disappeared. Must have turned around and it's one of those two over there, but those torpedoes missed, which it's disappointing, but kind of to be expected when you're firing, you know, these torpedoes, they're quite slow. I can't remember, but they're not more than 50 something knots. And I'm also firing at maximum range, so you can't really expect to hit your targets all that often. Anyway, take another broadside of torpedoes. And kind of this range here is basically where I like to be. It's kind of just outside the distance where that battleship's going to spot me, but well, because it's just outside the range, it's kind of fairly close, so my torpedoes won't take too long to arrive, and therefore there's less time for the battleship to manoeuvre. Unfortunately, that battleship did manoeuvre, and it turned kind of towards me to put its broadside on towards my enemies behind me, my allies behind me. So it's going to dodge those first batch of torpedoes, and it's going to dodge that second batch of torpedoes, because now it's decided to turn towards my allies. And so the first one you just saw went in front of its bows, and this second one's going to go well behind its stern. Which, it's unfortunate to waste so many torpedoes, but honestly I would not have predicted either of those manoeuvres. I thought it would have continued angling itself towards my allies to start with, and I just don't see any reason why it's kind of turned onto the other broadside now. Because it has to swing all of its turrets around, but sometimes your opponents just, they don't make sense to you. Anyway, I thought about taking some more shots there, but I was too scared of hitting this friendly cruiser that you can see passing in front of me now. So instead I'm kind of setting a course to pass between it and my friendly battleship, and I'll be able to shoot torpedoes kind of freely when I'm on the other side of it. But the cruiser's clearly had enough of this and it's turning to run back home, so I changed course to go between it and the enemies. Which is kind of the position I like to be in destroyers, unless, you know, the allies are very close to the enemy, in which case I prefer to be far away from the enemies. Anyway, take a couple of shots at that battleship. And I'm basically just going to follow this cruiser out now. I set the smoke screen up, partly because I was spotted and I don't want to get shot at, but also partly to shield my allied cruiser from enemy fire. Well, maybe not enemy fire, but enemy detection if it stops shooting. But smoke screens, they don't last as long as they used to before open beta, so it's a bit less useful. But I still think it's worth doing. Fire a couple of shots at where that battleship was, but I can't see it anymore. You see, my smoke screen hasn't done much. That enemy cruiser still being spotted. And that battleship managed to dodge my torpedoes, which, as I said, unfortunate, but you can't really expect that much. Oh, and that shot hit me from the enemy destroyer. And I've actually used all my smoke screens, so I can't hide. But, on the plus side, I just got 4 torpedo hits on that battleship. So that's good. Again, not quite enough to sink it, but I did a lot of damage, and it's going to help my team sink that battleship. At least in theory. Fired another broadside at that battleship, but although my torpedo tubes are loaded now, again, I'm not going to fire them because that friendly cruiser is kind of in the way. Thought for a second there I might get lucky and the enemy destroyer would sail into my torpedoes, but wasn't to be. And it looks like they just missed that battleship as well. But anyway, now that friendly cruiser's dead, I can actually fire my torpedoes freely. But right now, I was kind of thinking about screening this battleship and just zigzagging back and forth between it and firing torpedoes at the enemy, but I'm really much too close. The distance between them is too short for me to actually fit in between the two. So instead I'm going to head into the centre and try and capture the B point, since it appears to be unoccupied by either team. I fire off another broadside of torpedoes on my way out, simply because I can, and there's no harm, no reason not to. And those 4 torpedoes, the first lot, are looking alright. No, they just passed behind the battleship. Can be a bit hard to judge distances on this view, but whatever, gives us a bit of extra hope when there really was none. Spot the enemy destroyer in the smoke there and figured, oh, I'm going to use my guns for a bit. But it didn't give anywhere near enough lead with those shots. So I adjust, but because of the slow reload I'm not going to get a second chance here. But I managed to get 2 torpedo hits and managed to sink that enemy battleship. And we're 3/4 of the way to capturing B, so I'm heading back around to try and finish off that last enemy battleship. or the last one out on the open ocean, but I see one down in sea as well. Decide, since I'm here, I'll take a couple of shots through the smoke, but I'm not particularly optimistic at those ones hitting.
Taking the lead.
But anyway, heading back out to the open ocean to try and finish off this last enemy battleship out here. There's also an enemy destroyer out here. Oh, I didn't even notice that I put my engine boost on. Well, my engine boost is now off, so I'm back down to my normal speeds. Fire some torpedoes as soon as I can, because, well, I've just been spotted. That enemy destroyer is way too close, and I'm going to have to kill it because it can chase me down. That's a Wakatake, I believe. But luckily the battleship behind me manages to kill it. So I instead send a few shells over at this battleship. 3 hits. Seems to me that the Japanese... No. I just sunk that first battleship I fired at that was down at sea, and I totally forgot about that at the time. So I thought there must have been like a stealth destroyer hiding in there that I'd somehow killed. But that salvo of torpedoes killed that battleship, and we all saw it happen, so we all know what happens there. And basically, those 2 kills kind of secured the game in our favour. We were already winning slightly, but it gave us a pretty huge lead. But unfortunately, I followed up by dying to that cruiser. But I'm still sitting there going 15 torpedo hits, 7 shell hits, which is actually a fair bit, and a Japanese destroyer. Sunk 3 ships, 2 of them battleships. Actually, 3 of them battleships. I did alright in that game, even though I'm dead. The team's well ahead on points, only 2 enemy ships left, so we're clearly going to win this one. And I'm just kind of watching, see if those torpedoes manage to hit that cruiser. And the cruiser's miles away, so we'll just jump straight to the end, where it's a victory. 88,000 credits and 2,000 experience. You see top of my team, but that's kind of not surprising. It happens fairly often in destroyers, because you get a lot of credits for doing damage. But you see there's 60,000 damage with my torpedoes, and a few thousand everything else. So, 60,000, that's basically completely sinking 2 enemy battleships at tier 3, and this is a tier 2 destroyer. So yeah, that was a pretty good game. This one here, well, same map, it starts off kind of similar. See enemy cruisers, I take some shots. I'm kind of trying to keep the island in between me and the enemy so I don't get spotted. But I know I'm not going to be able to do it for very long, so I'm also trying to put a bit more separation between us. Just so that hopefully I won't get spotted, but I get spotted as that cruiser comes around the island. But I'm at a fairly long range, so hopefully I'll be undetected shortly. Fire some torpedoes at the gap between the 2 islands, and then I fire some at that destroyer. But that friendly destroyer just missed me with those ones, so I turn hard into it because I've got a bad feeling about this. And just managed to dodge his second salvo of torpedoes, which I'm very grateful I managed to dodge those. And I was also getting excited here because I can see my torpedoes going straight for that enemy destroyer, and I would love to torpedo him right now. But it turns around and manages to avoid them, which you kind of got to expect, but I was hopeful. But start going with my guns, got 2 shots, and my allies are also lighting up this destroyer. Send 3 more shells out, and well, I managed to get the kill.
Enemy destroyer sunk.
And it's not often you actually sink, enemy ships with your guns in Japanese destroyers, but I managed to do it there, and it wasn't really a kill steal. I did a fair bit of damage on my own right to that destroyer. But anyway, 2 enemy cruisers are coming at us, and behind it, way off in the distance, there are 3 enemy battleships. And these guys are going to be what I'm dealing with for the next, well, actually basically for the rest of this video. So I see that enemy cruiser, fire 2 torpedoes at it, and then I come around and fire 2 more torpedoes at this St. Louis. And then I turn to, put a bit of distance between us while we're reloading. And then I start panicking because I see my allied cruiser has turned a 180-degree turn, and it looks like it's about to collect my torpedoes. And, well, I was actually really glad that it rammed that enemy ship because, as you see, my torpedoes were heading straight for it, and I probably would have killed my ally if it hadn't have killed itself immediately before my torpedoes arrive. That other cruiser is retreating, which it's kind of a sensible decision because there's actually no point that cruiser being here. The battleships that should be defending are directly ahead of me, and this other destroyer you see here as well. So it's kind of only real options are either to charge towards us and try and essentially distract us from its battleships, or head back towards its battleships so it can actually effectively defend them. And it's kind of heading back towards its battleships, which is probably the right call, but really it shouldn't have been in that position to start with. Anyway, enemy battleships are now within range, so I'm turning around to bring my torpedoes to bear. And that St. Louis has spotted me, so I send a few shells its way. But, well, I don't quite lead enough, which is an odd thing with the St. Louis because it moves very slowly. And now it's firing at me, but luckily not particularly accurately. And I actually managed to set it on fire there, which is a good thing, but mainly because it kind of forces it to waste repair. And now just looking for more shots on those battleships. Again, hopefully ones that won't involve me torpedoing my ally. And those torpedoes there, they looked kind of good, but they obviously just don't quite have the range to reach that battleship. But I can kind of... I was hoping to get a shot between these islands here, that other battleship. But then the St. Louis is turning around, so I fired 2 torpedoes that way. And then 2 torpedoes at the battleship. And those torpedoes I didn't think had legs, actually 2 of them managed to hit that enemy battleship. And again, took about half of its health. And just watching the torpedoes head towards the enemy ships. But I don't really think either of them looks pretty good. They don't look very good, I mean. Take a couple more shots at the St. Louis. At least I think I'm about to, but I'm tossing up... The battleships are more important targets, and they're also easy to hit because they're less manoeuvrable. But I don't really have shots on any of them, and I've just been spotted. So I bring my torpedoes around. And fire them off. And now wait until I get more behind the Chester here, and then put my smoke up, again just to give it a bit of protection from that St. Louis, because the St. Louis will wreck it very quickly if it can get accurate fire on it. But smoke screens, they don't last for very long, and I've basically stopped putting it out. Fire a couple more torpedoes at the St. Louis, but St. Louis is turning away from us again. I'd like to think it was my torpedoes that caused it to turn away, because that basically allows this Allied Chester to escape. But could just be that was a cautious player, so might have had nothing to do with me. Although I did send 8 torpedoes that way and did cause them all to miss. And now I kind of want to inch a bit closer into the smoke screen just to try and keep spotting that St. Louis so the Chester can put a few more shots in. And well, I was thinking about adding my fire to it, but decided not to. Mainly because I didn't think I could actually hit it at that range accurately. And there are also battleships in front of me to sink, and that's my main job in the destroyer. And I've got shots, I'm at a decent range to take them. And I just want to come around and hide behind this island while I reload. And again, my team's actually winning this one pretty well, even though I haven't actually done that much. Sunk that destroyer early on, and I've got a couple of hits on the battleship, which... it's nice. And if you look at the objective of a game as being to do, you know, more damage than you take, I've already done more damage with those 2 torpedo hits than my entire hit points, so the maximum potential I could take. So in that sense, it's been a good game. Oh, those torpedoes look alright. But no, the enemy battleship sailed between them, which, well, I suppose it's good sailing, or steaming, by that enemy battleship. Fired off another broadside, and now I'm kind of heading out into the open ocean because, well, it kind of effectively put me behind the battleships. I was expecting them to be firing at my allied ships, which are kind of to their front. So I was hoping that they wouldn't notice torpedoes coming from this direction as quickly as they would if I had have gone the other way. But so far no luck. Managed to miss with my first broadside. And yeah, as I said in the last video repeatedly, you kind of can't really expect to hit all the time. But I was getting a bit frustrated by this point because so many of my torpedoes have been missing. Which is why you see me here, I'm turning towards the enemy, which is going to put me a little bit too close, so they've spotted me. And I generally don't like being spotted at all in destroyers because, well, it lets the enemy know you're there and I'd rather just hit them completely by surprise. But I did manage to get one hit on that battleship, and since I was spotted I decided to add a few shells in it. I was hoping to set it on fire, which I managed to do, but the fire didn't last very long. Essentially what I was thinking was, I know that torpedo caused flooding, and I just got absolutely wrecked then, but I repair it and use my speed boost to try and get away. What was this? Oh, see those other torpedoes managed to hit that other battleship and wreck it. What I was thinking was that my torpedoes caused flooding, so that battleship must have used the repair to stop the flooding. So if I could set it on fire, I would do a lot of damage at that point, but I set it on fire too soon afterwards, so put it out immediately. But instead I actually just managed to sink that battleship with my gunfire. And now I'm just going to run away, try and put as much distance between these battleships and myself as I can. But I keep firing torpedoes along the way simply because I can. It doesn't really slow down that much. And now that battleship's firing away at somebody else, so it's probably not going to notice my torpedoes coming in, the ones I just fired. But I'm kind of just lining up a shot on this other battleship, which is in our cap. Mainly on the principle, it looks like we're going to win because a bunch of my allied ships are in the enemy's cap and they've basically almost won. But I fire some torpedoes. I'm considering firing some shells, but my allies kill that one before I can. And it looks like those torpedoes I fired miss. But the game's about to end, regardless of whether my torpedoes hit or not. And, well, that's it. So in the end that wasn't actually too bad. 14 shell hits, I sunk 2 enemy ships and got a couple of torpedo hits in there as well. But just for a long time I was firing all those torpedoes and the battleships just keep missing them. As you see there, I only did 30,000 damage with my torpedoes, but 7,500 with high explosive shells and 1,500 with flooding, which kind of made up and made up the difference. And I was actually just really surprised that I managed to sink 2 ships with shell fire in that game. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.